The United States and Iran are two countries that have suffered almost a millennia of conflict and bitterness between one another. Their conflict spans to even before either country was founded. Throughout the centuries, there have been many events that have caused a change in the relationship between the two countries. However, actual diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Iran only began in 1941 when Britain and the Soviet Union invaded Iran for its oil fields during World War II. Since then, Iran and the U.S. have had a complicated relationship. There have been many factors that have affected this relationship between the U.S. and Iran, the earliest of which being the Crusades, in which the Western Christian civilization raided the Holy Land to rid it of the Islamic invaders. In 1095 AD, Pope Urban II made a speech in Claremont that called for all Christians to go and expel the Islamic invaders out of the Holy Land.
Let the deeds of your ancestors move you and incite your minds to manly achievements. Let the holy sepulchre of the Lord our Savior, which is possessed by unclean nations, especially incite you, and the holy places which are now treated with ignominy and irreverently polluted with their filthiness. O most valiant soldiers and descendants of the invincible ancestors, be not degenerate, but recall the valor of your progenitors.
When people heard this, they quickly joined the movement and went across the Mediterranean to join the fight to expel Islam from the Holy Land. At first, most Christians probably were fighting to rid the Holy Land of Islam and for their faith. But over time, their intentions grew darker and more sinister. They began to fight for greed and for themselves, and not for God. But how does all this relate to the Iran and U.S. conflict that is occurring today? Well, if you look at the religious makeup of both countries, you'll notice that America is over 75% Christian, and Iran is 95% Islamic. What this means is that the conflict between the two religions due to the Crusades was passed down to the two nations. So religion plays a big role in the conflict between the United States and Iran. So when religion spills over into politics, the results can be catastrophic. This was the case in the 1970s when an Islamic religious leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, started a religious revolution in Iran. The Iranian Revolution ultimately culminated into the 1979 hostage situation that took place in the American embassy in Iran, in which 52 American diplomats were taken hostage by radical Iranian students. It was this event that caused the US and Iran to completely sever all diplomatic ties.
And that we refuse to permit the use of terrorism and the seizure and the holding of hostages to impose political demands. No one should underestimate the resolve of the American government and the American people in this matter. It is necessary to eliminate any suggestion that economic pressures can weaken our stand on basic issues of principle. Our position must be clear. I am ordering that we discontinue purchasing of any oil from Iran for delivery to this country.
Then finally, after 444 days of captivity, all 52 hostages were released, thanks to the signing of the Algiers Accords. The Algiers Accords stated that the remaining 52 hostages would be released. But in return, the U.S. could no longer intervene in Iran in any way, and that trade barriers must be broken down. So as a result of the Iran hostage crisis, the U.S. no longer had any diplomatic influence in Iran. This was the United States' first encounter with radical Islam. And it wouldn't be the last. Over the next few decades, the United States, as well as some of Western Europe, would have to deal with these radical Islam groups, the most prominent of which being Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda, as stated by George W. Bush, is a terrorist group that practices a fringe form of Islamic extremism that has been rejected by Muslim scholars and the vast majority of Muslim clerics. A fringe movement that perverts the peaceful teachings of Islam. The terrorists' directive commands them to kill Christians and Jews, to kill all Americans and make no distinction among military and civilians, including women and children. This is evident in one of the most well-known events in modern history. The terrorist attack that occurred on September 11th, 2001. On September 11th, 2001, a group of terrorists known as Al-Qaeda launched a large-scale terrorist attack on the United States. An attack that claimed the lives of 2,753 people. It was the worst attack on U.S. soil since Pearl Harbor. And like Pearl Harbor, it called the United States to war.
The terrorists are traitors to their own faith, trying in effect to hijack Islam itself. The enemy of America is not our many Muslim friends. It is not our many Arab friends. Our enemy is a radical network of terrorists and every government that supports them. Our war on terror begins with Al-Qaeda, but it does not end there. It will not end until every terrorist group of global reach has been found, stopped, and defeated.
This reverberated to Iran, because just years earlier, the U.S. indicted Al-Qaeda of forging alliances with the government of Iran and its associated terrorist group Hezbollah for the purposes of working together against their perceived common enemies. Post 9/11, a lot of evidence arose that suggested Iran aided Al-Qaeda in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. For example, in 2004, it was revealed that 8 to 10 of the 14 Saudi Mossad operatives traveled into or out of Iran between October 2000 and February 2001. Another, more modern example is a ruling issued by Manhattan Judge George Daniels on December 23, 2011. Judge Daniels insists that Iran is responsible for 9/11. Of course, back in 2004, the CIA didn't have substantial evidence to directly link Iran to the 9/11 terrorist attacks. But the CIA remained wary of Iran and didn't fully trust them. A mistrust that would later be justified. In January of 2002, President George Bush described Iraq, Iran, and North Korea as an axis of evil, and warned of the rapid growth of the amount of long-range missiles being developed in these countries. In September of 2003, the International Atomic Energy Agency gave Iran weeks to prove it was not pursuing an atomic weapons program. In November of that same year, Iran suspends its uranium enrichment program and allows the IAEA to go deeper into their investigations, during which the IAEA find no evidence of any nuclear weapons being developed in Iran. So in 2005, the Iranian government in Tehran stated that it had resumed uranium conversion at its Isfahan plant and insisted that the program was for peaceful purposes. Over the next few years, Iran is continuously accused of trying to develop nuclear weapons, but no evidence is ever found that they were. Then, in 2009, Iran test fires a series of medium and long-range missiles that put Israel and U.S. bases in the Gulf within potential striking range. To the United States and the United Nations, this looked like Iran was essentially flexing its muscles at them and threatening them with military strikes. In response to these possible threats, the U.S. places sanctions on Iran. To this day, Iran continues to develop its nuclear program against the wishes of the UN and the U.S. So where is this conflict going today? Well, due to Iran's continued development of its nuclear program and its lack of cooperation with the US and the UN, it would appear that the conflict may only get worse. But if the Iranian government begins to cooperate with the US and the UN and stops hiding much of its nuclear program, we may begin to see the beginnings of the long road to peace.